Well, hello and welcome back to the Light Club. It's an honour to have you all with us this evening. My name is Kim Grant. I'm an outdoor photographer based in Scotland, and tonight we're going to be speaking to a very talented photographer from Ireland called Sean O Riordan. But before we introduce Sean, I just want to remind you all, for anyone who's interested, that next Sunday I'll be hosting my next NiSi Filters Day in Benwee Head on the northeast coast of Scotland. There's a few spaces left on this event, so if you'd like to come along, I'd highly recommend getting in there quickly. It'll give you a chance to try out the NiSi systems for yourself and the many different filters that NiSi offer, including polarizers, ND grads and NDs, and we'll be able to get some nice seascape shots. So if you want to book yourself on that, booking will be closing this Saturday, so ensure you get in there quick to secure your place. But without further ado, it's a great honour this evening to welcome Sean to you all so we can discuss his photography. Hello,
Hi
Sean.
Kim, how are things?
I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all good. I'm all good. Thanks for having me.
Really, well, thank you very much for being here. It's lovely to be able to chat to you this evening. And before we actually showcase some of your images, I wondered whether you could give people an introduction into who you are and kind of what got you into photography in the first place.
Yeah, well, there's not much to say really. I'm from a tiny part of rural Ireland. I've been doing landscape photography since 2018, and I'm primarily based on the west coast of Ireland. That's kind of where I do most of my shooting. But in 2018, I took a trip to Iceland, and I always enjoyed taking photographs, but like even growing up, even since I was small, but I never really had a camera, if that makes sense. I remember my parents got like a disposable camera for holidays. I used to always take it and I'd just be snapping away and like, Joe, you have to go and get your photos developed, and they'd go to take the family photos then and there'd be no film left on the camera, but because I'd have taken all the shots. But in 2018, then I had just a basic DSLR, and Iceland, obviously, incredible place for landscape photography. And it just opened my eyes to actually being able to capture these images. And I didn't know very much about it, but when I came back, I just dived headfirst, literally online, watching videos, going out shooting with other people here in Ireland, and literally done everything I could to just try and build up a bank of knowledge and went hammer and tongs into it, And
Brilliant.
the rest is history, really. Here I am.
Fantastic. It's lovely that you've always had that connection with photography right from when you were younger. I suppose it's always like been within you, and it's exciting now to see that you've taken it to the next level and invested in some proper gear. And I mean, the fact that
Mm,
you only properly got into photography in 2018, the standard of your work is amazing, as we'll see in a minute. You've got, incredible shots of predominantly Ireland and, beautiful times of the day, stunning scenery,
mm.
incredibly well exposed. You can see you've got a real passion for that,
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
definitely a passion for it, and I think it's just a creative outlet. I think I always was very creative, and it depended what I was going to do. And when photography kind of became that creative outlet for me, then, and obviously I'm spoilt in Ireland. Like some of the landscapes we have are incredible, and it was just being able to capture them is brilliant, and the places I've seen and creating stories through images. It's all. I'll talk more about it kind of when we go through some of the images, but it's it was a no-brainer to pick up the camera from where I lived.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Like you said, living in such a beautiful part of the world, I get similar feelings here in Scotland. When you live in such gorgeous scenery, it's natural, I think, that we want to capture it, and to have a creative outlet is so important for many, many things, as I've spoken about a lot in my own work recently. So yeah,
Mm.
that's beautiful for you to share that. So yeah, I think we'll get up your first image now and we can begin to speak through it. So if you're happy just to kind of explain this shot, what compelled you to photograph it? What is the story behind it? And of course, what filters did you use to create this image?
Yeah, well, this was taken on a recent workshop that I was leading in Achill Island, in County Mayo, and it's kind of funny when you're doing workshops. You kind of have to strike that balance. Like, obviously, your primary focus is the clients, so like a lot of time I won't take images because I'm trying to focus on the clients. But I've been very lucky. All the clients I've had, they encourage me to like, here, take out your camera, take a couple of shots. And when conditions are like this, I find it very hard to keep my camera in the bag. So this was taken with the 15 mil, and kind of my main focus here was trying to get this C stack on the left hand side into frame. And obviously, you can see the cliff that's kind of pointing towards the sun, and the cliffs on the right hand side then are also creating this lovely line in towards the sun. And just trying to frame it. when you have a subject in the image, so for me, the subject is this C stack on the left hand side. You want to give that a bit of separation, a bit of breathing room. So I left plenty of space to the left hand side of the frame. If you look there, kind of midway through the image, you can see there's another stack. I made sure to have space between the first stack and the second one, so they weren't on top of each other. That just creates this kind of sense of room in the image, you know. And I just wanted to show that bit of motion blur in the water. The waves, there wasn't that much of a swell. So I just stuck on, I think it was my four stop and I the CPL. I'll always use the CPL in any scene I'm shooting in landscape photography, just to make those colours pop a bit and to bring out that contrast in the scene, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's the composition spoke for itself. Just lovely lines and shapes and textures, and with some nice contrast in the sky as well.
Yeah, you've got a lot going on in this image from a kind of compositional, technical aspect, and it's great there that you spoke about leaving that separation between your sort of main subject and the outside of your frame, as well as all the subjects within your image. I think that's one thing that we quite often see when people begin photography is there's often subjects overlapping subjects, and it doesn't make the image as crisp and clear as it could be. But here you've got that beautiful separation going on throughout the scene. You've got that lovely almost frame going around there with the lovely cliffs, and the fact that the sun is setting, you know, bang in the middle of your frame as well. You know, it's like perfect in so many ways, and you know, having a good sunset like that was incredible for you to be able to capture. So yeah, and obviously that wide angle view that you've used there is allowing you to pull in that cliffs and really sort of emphasize the scene as well, which yeah is lovely to see. So
yeah, like having 15 mil is brilliant for a scene like this, you know. I needed to go as wide as possible, so and it's tack sharp from front to back. I didn't even need to focus stack or anything. So yeah, it all came together, which isn't always the case. But
no, it's not.
It did on this particular occasion.
It always looks so easy when you end up getting a photograph like this, but it just shows really all the elements that come together. A mix of, you know, the right conditions, the right time of day, an epic location, and of course the use of filters and certain equipment to create something. There's a lot of thought that goes into that. So yeah, everything came together here for you, which is fantastic. So yeah, we'll move on to your next image, which is this shot here, which you know, again, is in the similar same part of Ireland, but you've got a very different scene, very different colours and mood within this image.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a tough hike this was taking at sunrise, so we had to hike for about an hour, and obviously this time of year, this was taken the start of June, I think. So like sunrise is like 5:30. So it's tough to drag yourself out of bed and make the hike, but I had scouted this particular composition before, and we thought for the actual sunrise itself, not much happened. There was kind of a thick bank of cloud, but I could just see as the clouds were passing that I knew the light would break at some stage, and it was lucky enough it just broke above the mountain there, you know. And I love shooting vertically. Again, this with the 15 mil. I love shooting vertically for landscape photography because you can create so much depth in an image when you shoot vertically. And I think that's something that as landscape photographers we need to pay very much attention to. You need to create depth in an image because we can perceive depth. Like as we look at a landscape, our eyes can perceive depth as human beings. You know, cameras can't do that. So that's why you use composition and you use different elements in your frame to create that depth. So for example, here I'd use the rocks with a bit of header, then a further third into the frame, we'll call it. I had a lovely lake there that was just happened to go flat calm. And then in the background, I had the sun in the sky breaking through. And again, I used the polarizer just to help make those colors pop a bit more. And I didn't fully polarize it because I wanted to keep a bit of the reflection in the lake down below, you know, but I just polarized it enough just to give a bit more contrast and create a bit more of a dynamic scene. So you can see there's still a bit of a reflection in the water. If I had fully polarized it, might have gotten rid of that. So that's a little trick I do sometimes. You know, sometimes I'll fully polarize, sometimes I'll semi-polarize it if I want to keep a bit of a reflection. And again, a bit of separation. There's lovely lines in the shore, and yeah, it was a nice image in the end. You know, there's something from nothing. We thought we were going to get nothing that morning, but lucky enough we did.
Yeah, brilliant. It's definitely a good tip there about the polarizer, because I think some people maybe think that you either have no polarization on an image or you have the fully polarization, whereas it's good. The great thing about circular polarizers, of course, is that you've got the choice of how strong you put the polarization on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've definitely found that in some of my images. You just want that tiny little bit of polarization to allow the colors just to come through a little bit, but you don't want to remove everything completely, you know, the reflections, for instance. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's, I
exactly.
get one of the diverse parts of using that filter. And yeah, you've portrayed that very, very, very nicely in this image. So yeah, and speaking about depth there as well, you know, it's nice for people to be aware of that, you know, that it's easy for us to see depth with our eyes, but to do that in a camera, you really need those different sections of an image or a leading line or something to lead you through the frame. And of course, the vertical composition really, really helps with that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
brilliant. We'll move on to your next image, which is this beautiful shot here. You've got a great thing for photographing kind of epic landscapes with lovely rugged edges and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sea.
yeah. It's something I just the more epic the cliffs, the better, in my opinion. No, you wouldn't want to be scared of heights in some places, but again, this is in the west of Ireland, and something that I really kind of started learning to do and start not being afraid of basically was shooting directly into the sun. And that's it through a combination of using my grad filters and also learning how to exposure blend, you know. And it just creates a more dynamic scene. It's a scene that, like, this is a scene that often beginner landscape photographers might shy away from because somebody told them that they can't shoot directly into the sun, but of course you can. You just learn how to control the light, you know, and because you get a perfect balance of, you get the sun in the frame, you get a nice colorful sky, but you can see there along the header and along the ridge line, you've got all that lovely side light coming in. So that's what I wanted to do for this particular scene. You just have the different layers of cliffs as they go back along. The reason I used the wide angle here was to get that light. You can see that shape in the foreground there, and it kind of brings you right from the front of the image all the way to the back and along the cliffs. And once your eye gets to the cliffs in this image, it's going to follow that cliff line back along to the sun and to the sunset, you know. So yeah, just these are incredible cliffs in the west of Ireland, and just to the right you can see there's a mountain kind of going up the right hand side. That's called Crahon, and that's actually the third highest sea cliffs in Europe are there. So they're quite impressive as well, you know. I didn't make that hike that evening, but I had enough done in the legs by the time I shot this. But yeah, this is an incredible scene, just sheer drops. It's Ireland at its best, you know, particularly in the west of Ireland.
A very epic scene here. And one sort of question that was coming up for me there is the images we've looked at so far, the sun always seems to be pretty much perfectly placed within your images. How sort of meticulously do you plan your shoots in relation to where the sun's going to be rising or setting?
Yeah, that's something I do quite. I would be particular enough about where the sun is coming up. I use photo pills, so I think a lot of people might be familiar with photo pills. To see where the sun is rising, where it's setting, because it helps me plan my compositions. You know, like now this particular scene would look well. Like I've shot this scene in the middle of the day when the sun has been to my back. You know, but there are some scenes that will just look so well with that lovely side light coming in, and I know that if I plan it well, I can shoot side, I can get my side light there in one composition, and perhaps I could turn around and get another composition behind me as well. You
Mm.
know, so it's something I really enjoy that. I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to planning my images, you know, and I'll plan the image and I'll wait until the conditions come. Like I won't settle for anything less, basically, if possible. You know, like
Mm.
a location like this is quite far away from where I live, so I kind of, if I'm making the effort to travel, I'm going to take a shot regardless.
Mm.
But if it's a place within like an hour and a half drive, I'll be stubborn and I'll wait because generally it pays off. It might take 6 months, it might take a year, but I'll get there in the end.
Yeah, it's
You know?
interesting to see how different photographers work because I'm much more of an opportunistic photographer. I just kind of head out and just react to whatever happens and deal with the light. Whereas a lot of photographers like yourself who really, you know, meticulously plan their shoots to get the exact shot that they want. And I always like to
Mm,
stress that there's no right or wrong way to do things, but it's good to hear how each photographer approaches their work in
yeah.
a different way.
Yeah,
So
some
yeah.
days it is very enjoyable to just go and run and gun and see what happens, 100%. But a lot of time on those particular days, I'll discover a scene that I'll make a mental note of it and then I'll come back, you know. And
Mm.
it kind of works both ways, really. It depends on the scene.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely depends on the scene, the location, and yeah, how
Mm,
we work as individuals as well. So yeah,
mm.
brilliant. Well, we'll head on to your next photograph, which is this beautiful scene here. You've got very different colours again in this photograph, and you've not actually got the sunrise or sunset, specifically in the frame, but you've got that lovely cloud. So yeah, what was your thoughts behind this image?
Yeah, so this one, I think I have another image from the same shoot in this as well, but this one was when the sun had just gone down, and a lot of people will notice that the best color in the sky will always come just as the sun is dipping below the horizon, and that applies to both sunrise and sunset. So, for example, sunset, the sky will light up more often than not if conditions are good when the sun is below the horizon, and same for sunrise. Like pre-sunrise, you'll get your best color, and I love the shape here in the foreground. It almost looks like kind of a heart shaped thing going on there. And this has Benwee Head in Mayo. And I just wanted to try and shoot the shape in the foreground. And I wanted to use a nice long exposure just to blur out the swell that was kind of coming in around. It just gives it a bit more of an ethereal look. So you could see there the way the waves are blurred. So I was using a 6-stop. The water is so clear that you can actually see in, like if you look down the right hand side, you can see into the rocks there, And obviously my polarizer helped me out there. And it was just some lovely colour in the sky. And again, epic cliffs, lovely foreground. You can see another vertical composition. I wouldn't have been able to get the sky in along with the lovely shape in the foreground if I had gone landscape, So that's something don't be afraid of shooting vertical. I know a lot of landscape photographers do it, but there is kind of a thing that vertical shooting only applies like portraits or whatever. But I'd say definitely half my portfolio was shot in portrait, So I love shooting. Again, it helped me get that lovely shape in the foreground along with the sky. And I suppose another thing, try and keep your horizon in either the upper or the lower third. It's a rule that, no, don't get me wrong, I put my horizon smack dead in the middle of the image as well. Sometimes you forget about it, but as a good rule of thumb, kind of if you're starting out in competition, try and keep your horizon in the upper third or the lower third, and that's going to only depend on your composition. So here, obviously, my main composition was in my foreground, so I didn't need much of the sky in the image,
Yeah, it definitely helps, doesn't it? I think the only time I definitely put my horizon in the centre is if I'm shooting a reflection and I'm wanting that mirrored effect. But yeah, for the majority of
Exactly.
landscape shots, you definitely kind of want that third line there. And yeah, that's another thing there. You're talking about the intense colours that come either before sunrise or after sunset. And the amount of times I see photographers out at sunset, and the moment the sun's gone below the horizon, they just pack up and leave. And then the next half an hour is sometimes some of the best light. And so many people miss that. Or even not photographers, even people who are just out enjoying the sunset, they head home and then it's like the sky just goes ballistic. And it's like, oh, you've missed that.
Yeah. I think there's one image I think we'll get onto. It's one of the best sunsets I've ever photographed, and I remember just standing there. There was a couple of people around me. It was a lovely evening, and a lot of them packed up and left. I said, "You're going to miss the best part," and they just kind of said, "Oh yeah." They started laughing, whatever. They weren't photographers, but they were just tourists. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, the sky just erupted. And I've been there myself. I've literally been sitting into the car and the sky has erupted, and you're fit to cry, So I learned the hard way.
Yes, we've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we'll have a look at your next image now, which is, is this the shot that you were speaking about?
This is the one I was referring to. Yeah, this is the one. This is the Cliffs of Moher will be probably one of the most iconic locations in the west of Ireland, And you can see you can just see the tower in the middle of the cliff there, just halfway down. Yeah, there it is. And that'd be the most common viewing point where that tower is there. But this particular viewing point, I've started taking my workshops here now, and it's the best view of the cliffs. Because you just have the whole vista lead along. You can actually see there's another photographer up, very precariously standing on the cliff on the left hand side, top left. Top left. Yeah, there they are there. I wouldn't recommend standing up there now, but they got a good view as well. But this was a winter sunset. This was in January, so this could have been like 4:45 in the evening, and it's the best sunset I've ever photographed at this location. Ask any Irish photographer, it's so hard to get a good sunset at this particular location, And it was so good that I was kind of rushing a bit myself, so I just put on the polarizer, and that's all I had on. Now, in this particular scene, you could say, I want to blur out the water and everything, but sometimes when there's really nice light, you want to keep that texture in the waves because that catches the light much better than if the water is totally blurred out, So that's kind of a balance that you have to strike there. So you could just see, you can see the layers and the waves going back along. And I'm kind of happy that I just used the polarizer in this sense to try and keep those textures there, you know. It
Yeah.
looks really well. That's kind of, it depends on the scene, really.
Yeah, definitely. And that, like, you can see, like, if you, like you say, if you blurred that out, it wouldn't have had quite the same effect. Those little ripples in the water that are catching the
Mm,
light are just so beautiful.
mm,
You've just got some incredible colors within that and some incredible lines and everything. And I
mm.
mean, I've heard how difficult it is to get a good shot at that location. You know, it's like it's usually clouded over and not particularly interesting. And to get a
Yeah.
shot like this, I mean, this is almost looks surreal. It's like, is that real? And obviously, we know it's real because I've seen sunsets like this myself. But it's just like,
Yeah.
wow, for you to have captured this and the way the light's hitting the cliffs themselves, it's just insane. I think one
Oh,
thing
yeah.
I was going to ask you is, obviously the sunset's very bright, and you've not used a graduated filter here. So did you bracket for this image, or how did you
Yeah.
manage to get that right?
I bracketed, yeah. So again, the scene, obviously, the sun is actually in the frame, so I would have bracketed, you know, just to try and get that full dynamic range in. So when you bracket for a scene like this, you're getting the best of both worlds because you're getting the light on your foreground, you're getting the light on the cliffs, but you're also getting your highlights in, you're getting the sky, everything's nicely exposed, you know. And exposure blending is not that hard. It's kind of scares some people, but it's not, you know. And when you get used to using it, combine that with your grad filters, and you can literally shoot into any sun, any sunset, any sunrise you want, you know. And it really becomes, you become a more dynamic photographer because you open yourself up to more complex scenes that other photographers might not be able to shoot, you know.
Mm,
So yeah, that's how I captured this particular scene. And I could have kept the sun out of frame, but again, like you can see the very edge of the cliff, like at the very far back of the picture, I allowed plenty of breathing space there. I didn't have that tight up against the right hand side of my frame. It would have looked squashed in, you know. But yeah, bracketing, I mean, do I bracket all the time? No, I don't. But again, it depends on the scene, you know, and you
mm.
kind of just develop that sense as you shoot more and more.
Definitely. It's definitely a learning process in many ways, and like learning when to use filters, when not to use filters, what to decide what to use. You know, it just takes a while to kind of learn that. But as you say, the more you're out there practicing it, the easier it becomes to make those decisions. So yeah,
Absolutely.
incredible image. Huge well done in being able to capture this, because I
Thank you.
think it's a sort of the photograph that every photographer wants when they go to that location. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm proud of that one now. I smiled when I see that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, not
It was
surprised.
it was hard. It was hard work for us to get that one. So it was. Yeah,
And this image is quite different in many respects, but again, it's you've got beautiful light here. So yeah, what was your thought processes in this one?
yeah. Again, actually took this. I was on a workshop, a one-to-one workshop in Connemara last year, and it was one of those mornings where you really did not know what could happen. And generally, when it's one of those mornings, I'll have like I've got the peak design capture clip I used, and I'll have my camera on that, and I'll just have my camera ready to go. So, and I'll just pop on my polarizer, and I'll just be ready to shoot anything. So this was shot handheld, and all of a sudden a shower came, and rainbows will always form opposite the sun. So just in case, so that might be obvious. I'm not sure. I only figured that out last year, so it was like a revelation to me. But rainbows will always be form opposite the sun. So I could see a rain shower coming in across the valley there, and the sunrise was behind us, and the sun had been up for maybe about half an hour at this stage, and I just had a feeling that we might get a rainbow there, you know. So I
Mm,
this was on my 14 to 30 mil. I'm an icon shooter, by the way, just in case anyone's wondering. I shoot in the Z6, and this was on my 14 to 30 mil, and I just opened up 14 mil as wide as possible, and just one image just grabbed us quickly, you know. And like compositionally, it's mainly about the rainbow. You have a full arc of the rainbow there. It's quite a moody image. Like I do like shooting moody images as well. You know, it's not all about lovely sunsets and light.
mm.
Sometimes mood lends itself very well to the west of Ireland. And in this particular image, I just try and get that real contrast, moody sky, contrasting against the one bit of darker light there that's hitting the valley, you know.
Mm. Yeah, it's nice to. I know this was kind of shot around sunrise, but it's still nice to see an image that's not obviously a sunrise shot, and just showing how you can get nice shots by looking in the opposite direction. That's something that I quite
Mm,
often teach, is that you don't always have to shoot into the sun or with the sun as side light. You can actually look in the opposite direction. And some of my best sunset shots haven't actually been taken of the sunset. They've been taken of the beautiful hues and colors that are in the opposite direction to the sunset or sunrise. So it's nice here to
absolutely,
see
yeah.
the rainbow. So So yeah.
Yeah. Don't forget to turn around. That's what I tell my clients, like, don't forget to turn around because you don't know what's going to be happening behind you, and this is a perfect example of that. I
Yeah.
suppose we have a nice leading line in the shoreline there, the lake, which helps as well. But primarily, this was just about capturing the full arc of the rainbow, And sometimes
Yeah.
that's all you need in an image, just very simple.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you were very lucky here to have that leading line because I think otherwise, without that scene at the bottom, it might have been a bit of a flat image that we were speaking about earlier. But because you've got
Mm,
that leading line and almost that foreground going into the rainbow there, you've got some interest. So again, it's one of these shots where everything just sort of comes together.
yeah.
And it's yeah, a lovely shot. So brilliant, brilliant.
Thank you.
Well, we'll move on to your next image again now, which is this shot here. It looks like you had a bit of a climb to get to this location.
Yeah, I did have a bit of a climb. This is it's not too bad of a climb. It looks a lot higher than it is. I think it's about 600 meters. It's not too bad, but this is Diamond Hill in Connemara and Galway as well. Stunning place to even just go for. If anyone's in the area, just do the hike. It's not that hard. It's really nice. Incredible views. Compositionally here, I just love these limestone rocks leading the whole way out to the sunset and out to the edge. The composition makes itself. Again, wide angle, try and get that leading line. So you'll notice that I started the kind of image on the bottom left hand side of the frame, and that's just to try and keep as much depth in the scene as possible. Because you want to bring your viewer from front to back, essentially, in a landscape image a lot of the time, anyways, if you want to create that sense of depth. So the fact that I started in the bottom left, it brought your eye the whole way from the bottom left through the image and straight to the sunset again. You can see again, I would have had to bracket for this scene because now I think I only needed two brackets because the sun was just dipping below the clouds, so the dynamic range wasn't too bad, and the Z6 is actually very, very good for being able to pull back highlights and increase shadows. I'll always if someone's listening to this and let's say they don't want to take on the challenge of bracketing yet, well then expose for your highlights is what I would say, because it's very hard to bring back detail that's lost in highlights, whereas you often can, and modern day cameras are very good at recovering shadows. So I'd always kind of recommend exposing for the highlights if you're shooting a difficult scene. But yeah, this was a sunset shot, and you can see straight out to the islands there into the bay below. Lovely curve as wide as possible. I think this is probably 14 or 15 mil again on the lens. And again, I use the CPL just to try and get a bit of punch in the clouds there. You can see the clouds are just starting to catch, and the polarizer just helps bring out that bit of orange that's underneath the clouds. Because we obviously we want to try and show as much color in the sky as possible.
Yeah, brilliant. It's really interesting to see how much you use your polarizer. You say you've got it on your camera every time you go out, and it's interesting to see just what a big impact that does make on your images, and what a big part it plays in what you do. And as you're saying with this leading line here, it's important to lead through the image, but also ensure that you've got something to lead to. And of course, here you're leading bang to the actual sunset. You're not leading into nothing and nothing exciting. You're leading into kind of the main sort of interest here, which being able to compose your image so that your leading lines are actually leading towards something that you want the viewer to realize. So
I had been on top of the summit for a good hour, so I had taken my time and tried out the compositions and framed them up. So I suppose all you have to do then was wait and hope that Mother Nature plays ball.
Yeah,
That's it.
It shows the importance there, I think, of getting to a location early and not having to rush as well. It gives you that maneuver time to really scout it out and be ready for when the main show kicks off. So
yeah. You'll still always panic though. As much as you're waiting with the light kicks off, you still panic.
Yeah, you are. Are you in the right spot? Is this the best composition? Things happen quicker than you expect, and you are. But it's part of the excitement, isn't it? Is that moment of panic? So
absolutely.
Brilliant, brilliant. And your next image is nice to see you here getting actually down to the shore itself and getting some of that motion in the water. So you've used a 4-stop filter here. So just to explain kind of what your thought process is behind using that was.
Yeah, so the 4-stop would probably be my most common filter for my seascapes. No, I am trying to get more into real long exposure photography, especially on flat days. I would like to try and get a bit more motion in the clouds and streaking. But when I'm down close to the shore like this, I love showing texture in the water while still showing that motion blur. I think it gives a great sense of drama and movement. you know. So like that's why I wouldn't go with my 10 stop here, because I feel like it might just blur it out a bit too much, you know. Especially when there was nice light break, and like I wanted to create that sense of drama and kind of franticness. So you can see I probably only use a sixth of a second here to maybe 1 second shutter, just enough to get the motion blur in the water, but still show that texture in the incoming wave, you know. And you can almost imagine the wave. You get that sense of motion coming in. So that's why I'd use the four stop ahead of anything else. And I just love the color. This real, it reminded me of the black sand beach in Vic in Iceland. It was real dark stone, and the contrast of that against the white foam, it just really kind of popped. Like there isn't. I know you've got some light breaking in the back of the image, but I loved the jagged line that goes up along the shoreline there that the waves make. And this was absolutely frantic. Like a minute later, that light disappeared. You know, so I remember just arriving to the beach, put on my filter, and just really. It's probably a fluke that I'm down so low, because if I didn't have time to extend the tripod fully, you know, but it worked out. It worked out in the end. Um, and just this scene is all about that franticness in the waves, motion blur in the water, and just try and pull it all together, you know.
Mm. It's nice that your kind of franticness that you were actually experiencing in real life, you've managed to put that into an image as well. That's something I quite often encourage people to do, is how does that scene or that moment make you feel? Are you at peace and tranquility? In which case, how can you showcase that in your image? Is it a stormy, crazy, almost dangerous day? If so, how do you portray that in your image? So it's nice here to
Yeah,
see that that frantic feeling is actually coming across in your image. And by using the four stop filter, you can create that slight motion in the wave to portray that, which is yeah, a very creative thing to do.
yeah. Thanks. It was quite frantic, and obviously that's something that I would try and encourage people to do. Is, yeah, try and tell a story with your image. Try and make the viewer feel like they are there at that moment. And I think if you've done that, you've succeeded. You know.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Brilliant. We'll move on to your next shot here. This feels like something quite different in many ways. Like, obviously, the sun's still quite low, so this must have been a sunrise or a sunset. But you've got it a bit higher in the sky here, and you've not quite got that intense light. And of course, you've used the starburst here as
Mm.
well. So yeah, just to speak through anyone who doesn't know how to do starbursts, maybe it might be a good thing to explain.
Yeah, so this was again in Mayo, where we just had to wait. So this was actually like 35, 40 minutes after sunrise, and this scene was completely different before the sun had come up. And now I knew from photo bills and just from knowing the area that the sun would come up at a particular time. It was just a matter of waiting. And the fact that we didn't have great light before the sun came up, it gave us a chance to frame up our composition, you know. So this is in Keene Bay, quite an iconic scene in that particular location, and you're shooting the sheep along with the hut and the mountains in the background. And it was a very peaceful morning. It was flat, calm, and the sunburst is something I really like to do. And with the 15 mil from NiSi, you can get a sunburst at any particular aperture, which is very, very handy. Now, if you don't have the 15 mil, you're going to want to step down your lens to anything between f14, f16, f18 to try and get that sunburst effect, you know. Now, I found with sunbursts, they work best when the sun is slightly offset by an object. So, in other words, the sun is just peaking above the cliff face here, and that helped create this. It's like if the sun is semi blocked, it helps create a more defined sunburst. As opposed to if it was fully developed up in the sky, you know. So that
Mm.
just helps. Now, literally, it came up so fast that 30 seconds later, the sun was up, and that was it. The chance was gone. But it was just a very opportunistic image, and the sheep, thankfully, got into frame. They were walking into frame, they were walking out of frame, and I was just afraid that one of them would hold her. So luckily enough, they did, and that helps add to the whole story of, like, you know, the west of Ireland and rural Ireland, stuff like that. And it was a perfectly clear sky, so I don't mind using the grad, pulling down grads there and made it really dark on the top of that sky, because there's no interest in that sky. The whole
Mm.
interest is in the foreground for this particular image. But sunbursts are really good fun to play around with in woodlands as well. Sun coming through the trees, it's really easy to create a sunburst effect.
Mm.
Yeah, I definitely encourage people to mess around with them.
Yeah, brilliant. It's nice to cover that because I don't think that's something we've discussed in other interviews we've done so far in this series. So yeah, that'll be something new for people to look into and maybe try for themselves. So yeah, thanks for explaining that
Definitely.
there. Fantastic, brilliant. And your next shot is yeah, this gorgeous mountain and lake scene here. Again, another
Mm.
beautiful shot with lovely lighting conditions.
Yeah, again, this was actually taken on the same morning as the one with the rainbow, so you can kind of see the similarities. It's one of those real. Uh, in winter in Ireland, I love shooting in winter. That's probably my favorite season to shoot in winter, kind of early spring, because you get these sunshine and showery days where the light is soft all day long. Like this was a good few hours after sunrise. This was taken, and the light is still nice and soft. A showery day, moody colors in the sky, and because this is a perfect example of having the sun kind of behind you or just to the left hand side and out of frame, you get all that lovely side light and lovely mood, and you don't really have to contend with very strong highlights. And probably my favorite part of this image is just the dark light on the mountains in the background there, in Lough Inagh and Connemara. Again, a very iconic place to visit and shoot, and wide angle, as wide as possible here. Again, 14 mil, just to try and get the shape of the lake in, with the hut, and the polarizer helped give me that punch. So you can see the blues there, kind of in the sky, in between the clouds. That's what that polarizer is going to help bring out. It's going to really help create that contrast in those blues and prevent them from getting washed out. And they just add to the whole drama of the sky.
Mm. Yeah, it's incredible actually what a polarizer can do to a sky, especially around the clouds. As you say, it really brings out that blues, and the same around sunset or sunrise when you've got that pinky purpley colours. If you use your polarizer, it just draws that out more and makes the clouds more defined, so they're not like washed out. You can see very clearly where the
Mm,
cloud starts and ends, and it just adds an extra dynamic to your images, which is so much
yeah.
more interest than not using the polarizer.
Or
So
days with like thunder showers, any day with thunder showers, those are always the days you see those real nice defined clouds that they look
mm.
almost surreal. That's a polarizers help bring them out so well, and those lovely textures and defined lines in them.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful. And your next shot here, we're back up on the cliffs again. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm no stranger to them. My family members would be giving out to me sometimes, but I tell them I always say it. This is probably one of the most iconic locations in the north of Ireland. To be honest, Malin Head. I think a lot of people have shot here. It's a tricky place to shoot, and you can just see there the if I was to be critical of myself, the kind of edge a headland there is kind of parallel. It's all just level with the horizon, and unfortunately, there's actually nothing you can do there. It's just due to the elevation, and anyone who shot there has struggled to be able to break that horizon. But other than that, you've got some lovely side light. I done quite a long exposure here. I think it was 5 to 6 seconds, just because I liked the trail of foam there in around the sea stacks. And I had time to be able to set up my filters and get this composition ready. If I was shooting this scene now with my filters and all that, I would always frame it up first. So I wouldn't have my filters attached at this stage. I frame up my scene, I focus, I take my test shots, I make sure it's nice and sharp, and then I'll pop on my filters, because sometimes if you're trying to manual focus with a six stop or whatever in front of the lens, it's too dark. So you can't
Mm,
see the scene to try and focus on. So I always try and focus, then pop on my filters. I use the NiSi app, the exposure calculator as well, to calculate my exposure and whatnot, and that's very helpful. But yeah, just some lovely side light in this scene. Not much happened when the sun went down, so again, that's another tip. Don't always wait and think that, okay, I'll just wait for the sun to go down and then the sky is going to erupt.
mm.
Oftentimes it doesn't. So use the light when it's there. Get a couple of shots. At least then you won't go home empty-handed.
Yeah, definitely. I sometimes find some of my best images come like half an hour before the sunset. And if you're, like you say, waiting out for that golden opportunity moment, it doesn't always come. And sometimes especially if there's clouds on the horizon, you want to try and get that light before the sun disappears. So yes, this is definitely a good example of that. So yeah,
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So this is Ireland's most northerly point, Malin
Okay,
Head. So yeah, yeah. So a little fun
brilliant.
fact there, but it's an incredible place to. It's really easy access. So I'd highly recommend people going there. Just check it out if you're ever in Donegal.
Brilliant, brilliant. And here we've got some spectacular pinks in the clouds here. I mean, what an epic shot this is. Are you quite high up on a hill here for this image?
Yeah, we are quite. It's called Minaun Heights, and it's one of the best views on Achill Island. So you are quite high up, but the best thing about it is you can literally drive to this location and walk 2 minutes from your car, and this is what greets you. So it's a little gem, and I'm surprised I don't see more photos from there. This is actually a pano, so sometimes people will notice this if you're trying to shoot an epic scene, the scale can get lost depending on what focal length. So like if you're using a wide angle here, you're going to have all this kind of empty space in your foreground. So I put on my 24-70, and this was at about 35 mil, and it was a 5 shot panorama, I think. And I put on I think I had my polarizer and I had my soft grad on just to try and contain the highlights a bit. Like I wasn't, yeah, so I had this with the V7 system, I had my polarizer and my soft grad. I wasn't too concerned about the foreground here. Once it was okay, once it was reasonably well exposed, like there isn't much going on there. So that this is more about the colors in the sky. And once you could see the line there of the ocean in the bottom of the image, then I was quite happy. So that's why I shot the pano, just to try and get the scale in, get the mountains in the background, get that lake in the right hand side. It wouldn't have been the same with a wide angle, and it's a place I struggled to shoot, and it was a place I struggled to shoot until I actually said, okay, maybe I'll try a panorama. This is a perfect example. Again, the sun had just dipped below the horizon, and for 10, not even 10 minutes, 5 minutes, the sky just lit up in these fantastic colors. It was a total whiteout until then. Almost, there was no sun, no light, and again, it just pays to just wait, be patient. Like what's waiting an extra 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Especially if you've made the effort to go to a location, then don't be rushing away.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the best images often come in days that are dull and boring, and right at the last minute, you've got that break, and because there's so much interest in the sky and so much drama, it's just that little bit of light. And as you were saying here, that was like your main focus here was that light and that color, and actually the rest of the scene helps tell that story, but it's not such a big deal about the foreground because that's not where the interest is. So yeah, it's always about thinking, what's your story? What is the interesting part, and how can you make that clear within your image? So.
Exactly, yeah. And you can just see in the very kind of left hand side, there's like 3 kind of cliffs going back along. That's remember one of the very first images we showed with Benmore cliffs shooting directly into the sun. That's actually that location. So we literally went from one side of the island to the other, So got good value for those locations.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. And then we've got this image here, much brighter. Some beautiful light going on here. Yeah. So what was your thoughts here? You've obviously done a little bit of a long exposure here with the nice smoothed out sea.
Yeah, again, a long exposure, just to create those kind of foam trails in the water. I like the look of them. It works quite well, and you can see it's just the water's blurred nicely around the cliffs because there wasn't really much light catching the waves the way they were coming in. So I was like, no problem, I'll shoot a long exposure here now, and it'll work quite well. A perfect example of when side light is your friend here. So this is just perfect side light coming onto these cliffs. You can see the bit of separation between the islands out in the middle of the frame and the main stack here on the right hand side. I just allow that separation between the two of them. It just doesn't look right. Now, it's not always possible to have that separation, but excuse me, it's something that you should consider doing. It creates a bit better sense of space in the image, and it just looks like you haven't squashed everything down on top of each other. This was taken on the same evening as the kind of vertical image where it was like the heart shape in the foreground, so I was able to get this particular shot with the side light, and then I was able to move down to the next composition and shoot, and hopefully wait for the sun to dip, and get that image. So that's kind of an example of where you can use the side light to your advantage and still have time to take another image afterwards. But yeah, some fantastic coastline. Some of the best coastline in Ireland is North Mayo. It really is incredible, and not a soul around as well. I was the only one there, which is even better.
Really inspiring me to come. I've done a little bits of Ireland. I've been to like Kerry and Cork and stuff, but I've never been further up. You're definitely
Yeah,
inspiring me to come over at some point. Yeah,
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. No, Mayo is incredible. It is. It really is. Yeah,
Fantastic. And then this image here got some beautiful kind of wave splashing going on here. That's yeah, this is a very
yeah.
creative, dark, moody image.
Yeah, again, as much as I like shooting in lovely side light and golden hour light, I really like creating mood as well. And the Burren is a place that mood lends itself really well to. The Burren is actually where Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings and all those books, The Hobbit, he visited the Burren like I think 1920s, and that's where that was his inspiration for like Mordor and the Lord of the Rings and all that. So it's just that kind of place, you know. It just lends itself well to dark, moody images. And this particular evening, I actually ended up getting soaked as well because those waves were they were one or two of them were quite big, and just the splash would come up, and my lens got a good drenching. But it's all good. It's still working. It's still good. But yeah, like use the waves, use the motion of the water. There's lovely textures in the rocks and the burn, so I'll always try and use those rocks. You know, you can see them the whole way along, and these aren't particularly high cliffs or anything, like, you know, but they look quite big when you use a wide angle and try and emphasize that, like really blow everything up. And there's lovely textures in the sky, lovely mood. Literally here, all you're worrying about is getting the right wave.
Mm,
And I wanted to show a bit of motion in the water, and again that franticness, and just show that splash coming up. So like I could have taken 20, 30, 35 shots here, just waiting to get the right wave, you know. Just have your shutter. I use a remote shutter release. I frame up my composition. I'll get my exposure correct with my filters, and after that, it's just a matter of getting the right wave and just timing it. Every 5, 6 turns, the bigger wave will come in. And it's a really fun thing to do because when you have the time, like I was only interested in shooting this composition. I wasn't interested in shooting anything else, you know, just this one. So I was able to take my time. And this is with the 15 mil as well, the NiSi 15 mil f4. So
mm.
it's absolutely tack sharp, even in the corners. You know, it's I'm really happy with it.
Brilliant. Yeah, it definitely looks like a very sharp lens, this. And you can see you've used it in many of your images, which is fantastic to showcase that depth, that wide angle view. And yeah,
Mm.
it's good to have a lens so wide as well that you could use filters with, because there's often some camera brands have got wide angles, you put filters on them and you end up with vignetting and stuff. So it's nice to be
Yeah.
able to use the both of them together and not have that. So yeah, it's
Mm.
brilliant.
Oh, it takes us
Brilliant.
through in filters, yeah, and like usually some wide angle lenses, you have the bulbous front element, so you need special adapters to
Yeah.
take filters. So it's really handy, and to have just 15 mil one focal length. You know, it's like that prime lens. Like it makes you zoom with your feet and really get
Yeah.
creative and think about your composition. So yeah, I'm
Mhm.
really enjoying it. Really enjoy having it
Yeah.
in the bag. It's so small and light. I'll take it everywhere with me. You know.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah,
Fantastic. And then we've got something completely different here. You've got a
yeah,
waterfall.
yeah. Which is yeah. It's again. I enjoy shooting waterfall. I don't do it enough. And the amount of rain we get in Ireland, there's no fear that there's water in the rivers because there is, you know. So I should try to shoot them a bit more. I've actually found this scene. One day when I didn't even have the camera with me. I was just out hiking, and
Mm,
some days I'll take the camera with me. Some days I won't. And I love the shape of the tree and the way it kind of frames the waterfall in the background. And it was really tricky to try and get that. Like literally the tripod was so precariously placed, and it was really tricky to try and get that frame, and I just about got the tree over the waterfall without it cutting off the waterfall, you know.
mm,
And it was autumn time, so we kind of just had some flecks of orange and yellows coming through. But yeah, this was all about framing that waterfall with the tree. And it's a lovely little scene. It's a really it's a bit of a hidden gem, really. I'd never seen a photograph before, so I was glad to capture it, you know.
mm. Yeah, something a bit different here. I think a lot of people struggle to photograph waterfalls in these sort of locations and trying to find
Mm.
them so that you've got some foreground and so that it's not just the waterfall. And yeah, it's interesting here to see how you've used the bank here and the tree to almost frame around the waterfall. It's yeah, quite a
Yeah,
unique image and a location that would probably be quite difficult to get an image. So
it's
yeah.
not easy. Yeah, there was wet feet now trying to get across this 'cause I had to cross the stream. So yeah, and I suppose just to touch on post processing a tiny bit, you can kind of see that I've used quite a strong vignette in the bottom and the top of the image there because you want to draw you want to draw the viewer's eye to the actual tree in the waterfall. So
Mm.
when you're post-processing your images, always think about where you want the viewer's eye to go to, you know?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. It's definitely a good thing to cover there. So yeah, fantastic. And then you've got another waterfall here, but in a completely different location and with a rainbow and some gorgeous lights. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So again, very lucky. Got some. The sun was to my back, and this was in the middle of the day. You know, this was literally as remember you touched there, Kim, that it's nice to see, people can see that it doesn't always have to be sunrise or sunset. You know, so this was in the middle of the day. The sun to my back. And I was just set up the composition, wait for a rain shower to pass and a bit of light, and I got a rainbow in, and a lovely waterfall. We've got lovely textures flowing down through the over the cascades, you know. Polarizer helped bring that bring that contrast out as well in the water.
Brilliant.
You
Loads of
know,
good elements there coming together once again. And yeah, beautiful, strong composition too, which is lovely. And as you say again, showcasing that nice vertical feel there too. So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, there were some incredible images, Sean. There's so much interest there. Beautiful lights, beautiful compositions, loads of things for people to think about in their own photography. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to share that with us. And you can see on the screen, anyone watching, that they can find your website there and look at your images further and maybe have a look into attending any of your workshops that you're doing too. So yeah,
brilliant. Yeah,
fantastic.
thanks a million. Thanks a million, Kim. I enjoyed that.
Thank you. I love it when an Irish person says thanks a million. You can't say it's one of those sayings, isn't it? You just got to say it.
Yeah, it's so common. It's so common. We don't even realize we're saying it.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Sean. And
Thank you.
before we sign off, it's just to remind everyone that next Sunday, if you are interested, as I was saying at the beginning, my next NiSi filter event is happening in Benwee Head on the Moray Coast in the northeast of Scotland. Yeah, booking will be closing this Saturday, so if you are interested in coming, make sure that you secure your place before then. So yeah, as always, thank you all for watching this afternoon. It's been a joy to have you, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.